May 13, 1942. The Dover Strait, 3 miles off Cap Green. 3 British motor torpedo boats cut through darkness at 39 knots. Mahogany hulls 73 feet long, 49 tons each. The Germans called them toys. Civilian pleasure craft playing at war. Too small to matter, too fragile to threaten real warships. MTB 219 closed to 500 yards. Temporary Sub-Lieutenant Mark Arnold Forrester, Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve, sighted the German convoy through spray and darkness. His target, the auxiliary cruiser Steer, appeared as a dark mass against the French coast. But between Arnold Forrester and Steer sat something else. A German torpedo boat, 920 tons, 127 crew, 4 105mm guns, the kind of warship that could blow a 73-foot wooden boat to splinters with a single salvo. Arnold Forrester fired one torpedo. The 18-inch weapon accelerated to 40 knots, its 388 pounds warhead tracking towards Steer. It missed the cruiser. It hit the torpedo boat Iltis instead. ITs broke in two. Not slowly, not gradually. The hull snapped like a pencil. 115 German sailors died in seconds as the sea rushed into both broken sections. Before survivors could process what happened, MTB 221 fired at the second escort, the torpedo boat Seidler. 735 tons, 75 crew. The torpedo struck amidship. Seidler rolled over, split apart, and sank. 85 more Germans drowned. 2 substantial warships, over 1,600 tons combined, destroyed by wooden boats the Marine had dismissed as irrelevant. German gunners managed to sink MTB 220 in return, killing Lieutenant Cornish and 7 crew. But the mathematics were brutal. 3 small boats had eliminated 2 major escort vessels and 200 German sailors in a handful of minutes. Wooden toys had just rewritten Channel warfare. This wasn't supposed to be possible. By 1940, Germany controlled both sides of the English Channel. The fall of France in June had placed every port from Brest to Den Helder under Wehrmacht control. German coastal convoys moved supplies and troops through waters that had been British for centuries. The Kriegsmarine Schnellboote, the E-boats, raided British shipping with near impunity. The sleek diesel-powered craft displaced 112 tons, reached 43 knots, and carried 2 21-inch torpedoes plus heavy automatic cannon. British convoys between London and Bristol suffered catastrophic losses. One convoy in autumn 1940 lost 14 ships out of 25. E-boats struck at night, disappeared into darkness before Royal Navy destroyers could respond, and returned to French or Belgian ports before dawn. The Channel had become a German lake patrolled by German boats. The Royal Navy needed a counter. Destroyers were too large, too slow to respond, too valuable to risk in shallow coastal waters mined by both sides. Motor torpedo boats, small, fast attack craft armed with torpedoes, offered a solution. But the Admiralty remained skeptical. One assessment called them more of an annoyance than an asset. Another noted that no thought was given to tactics for these craft. They looked wrong. Civilian speedboat hulls armed with naval torpedoes, wooden construction in an age of steel warships, petrol engines when every proper warship burned oil. Crews of weekend sailors and fishermen rather than career naval officers. The Germans shared this assessment. As late as 1938, the German fleet commander recommended that SB boot construction, their own motor torpedo boat program, be terminated on grounds that the craft was merely a weapon of opportunity without a defined role. If the Kriegsmarine dismissed their own technically superior E-boats as questionable assets, British MTBs built of mahogany by furniture manufacturers seemed even less credible. The threat was immediate and quantified. German E-boats of the S-100 class measured 114 feet long. They displaced over 100 tons. 3 Daimler-Benz diesel engines produced around 6,000 to 7,000 brake horsepower, pushing them to over 40 knots sustained. The diesel engines provided crucial advantages over petrol power. No volatile fuel vapors, no fire risk from a single tracer round. The round-bottom displacement hull maintained speed in rough North Sea conditions where planing holes had to slow dramatically. Range extended to 700 to 750 nautical miles. British MTBs managed roughly 600. E-boats could patrol further, stay on station longer, and return home with fuel to spare. Armament included 2 21-inch torpedoes, later increased to 4, a 37mm automatic cannon forward, 20mm cannon aft, heavy machine guns in multiple positions, crew of 21 trained naval personnel. Between September 1939 and May 1940, E-boats sank over 100,000 tons of Allied shipping in the North Sea Channel. They laid mines that sank thousands of tons more. They attacked the destroyer HMS Kelly, forcing it to limp home on one engine. They torpedoed merchantmen, tankers, and escorts with a confidence born of technical superiority and British inability to respond effectively. British coastal forces needed vessels that could match E-boat speed, carry effective armament, operate in the same shallow coastal waters, and do it all at a fraction of destroyer cost. The Admiralty looked at several designs, most failed basic requirements. But two engineers had been developing high-speed craft on their own initiative, funding prototypes from personal resources after official channels proved skeptical. Peter Duquesne was born in 1901. By 1939, he served as managing director of Vosper Limited, a shipbuilding firm in Portsmouth. Duane understood hydrodynamics. He'd studied hard chine planing hulls, the V-shaped bottoms that lifted craft onto the water's surface at speed rather than pushing through it. He'd analyzed weight distribution, engine placement, and structural integrity requirements for wooden hulls operating at 40 knots in open water. The Admiral awarded early MTB contracts to British Powerboat Company instead of Vosper. Duquesne could have accepted defeat. Instead, he funded construction of MTB 102 from company resources, 68 feet long. 3 Italian Esso-Torrini petrol engines of around 1,100 horsepower each, giving her 48 knots light and over 40 knots in service. The fastest wartime British naval vessel afloat. More importantly, Duquesne solved the torpedo launch problem. Early British MTBs used stern launch systems. The boat accelerated, the torpedo dropped off the stern into the water, its engine started, and it theoretically tracked toward the target. This method was unreliable, dangerous, and limited to targets directly ahead. During launch, Duquesne developed tube-launched torpedoes. The tubes sat in troughs on the deck, angled outward. Compressed air ejected the torpedo directly into the water already running. This system allowed firing at angles, targeting multiple ships without repositioning, and dramatically improved reliability. MTB 102 became the template. The Admiralty ordered production. Vosper would eventually deliver over 350 boats based on Duquesne's designs. Hubert Scott Payne founded British Power Boat Company in 1927. By 1939, he'd pioneered the hard chine V-hull that became the standard pattern for Allied high-speed attack craft. His boats combined speed with seaworthiness. The hard chine, the sharp angle where bottom met sides, created lift at speed while maintaining directional stability. When war began, Scott Payne didn't wait for Admiralty approval. He met President Roosevelt in October 1939 to demonstrate British MTB technology. The Americans contracted for PT boats based on Scott Payne's designs. The prototype PT-9 led directly to 754 American Elco PT boats built during the war. In December 1944, Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal paid Scott Payne $200,000 in recognition of his contribution to American fast attack craft development. The British admiral remained unconvinced until events forced reconsideration. The fall of France in June 1940 placed German forces 21 miles from Dover, and boat bases in Callao, Boulogne, Ostend, and Rotterdam launched nightly raids. British coastal convoys hemorrhaged tonnage. Something had to counter the threat immediately. November 1940 brought command changes that transformed coastal forces from a neglected sideshow into a serious fighting arm. Rear Admiral Pierce Kowich received appointment as Flag Officer Coastal Forces. Captain Augustus Agar, holder of the Victoria Cross for MTB operations in the Russian Civil War of 1919, became Chief Staff Officer. Agar understood small boat warfare. He torpedoed a Russian cruiser from a tiny coastal motorboat. He knew what wooden boats crewed by determined officers could achieve against larger warships. Production accelerated. The Vosper 73 feet MTB represented the mature British design, 73 foot length, 19 feet 6 inches beam, 4 feet 6 inches in draft, displacement of 49 tons when fully loaded with fuel, torpedoes, ammunition, and crew. Hull construction used double diagonal mahogany planking on laminated wood frames. 9 watertight compartments provided survivability if the hull was holed. The hard chine planing hull lifted the boat onto the surface at speed, reducing drag and allowing higher velocities. 3 ACA 4M 2500 supercharged V12 petrol engines produced 450 to 4,500 brake horsepower. These were American engines. British engine production couldn't meet demand. The Packards were marinized versions of aircraft engines, powerful but temperamental. They drank fuel at prodigious rates. They required constant maintenance, but they delivered the speed necessary to catch E-boats or run from superior forces. Maximum speed reached 39 knots in calm seas. In rough conditions, speed dropped significantly. The planing hull that worked brilliantly on smooth water pounded brutally in waves. Crews learned to slow down in heavy seas or risk structural damage and injuries. Armament consisted of 4 18-inch torpedo tubes. The Mark 8 torpedoes carried warheads of 388 to 440 pounds, range extended to 2,500 yards at 40 knots. Firing required precise calculation, range estimation, target course, and speed. Torpedo running time, wind, and current. At night in darkness, while the MTB bounced through waves and enemy traces cut overhead, this demanded extraordinary skill. Two 20mm Ericon cannons provided close-range firepower. Twin Vickers K303 caliber machine guns covered additional arcs. Later boats added heavier armament, 6-pounder guns, additional Ericons, depth charges for anti-submarine work. The basic armament philosophy prioritized torpedoes over guns. MTBs were assassins, not brawlers. Crew numbered 17, 2 officers, 15 ratings. The commanding officer, typically a temporary lieutenant or sub-lieutenant from the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve, the first lieutenant, the coxsman who steered the boat, 3 motorboat mechanics who kept the temperamental Packards running, torpedo crew, gunners, wireless operator, deck hands. Many officers came from civilian backgrounds, weekend sailors, racing yacht crews, anyone with small boat handling experience. The Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve trained them at HMS King Alfred and Coastal Forces bases. They learned navigation, torpedo tactics, recognition of enemy vessel types, and the peculiar demands of commanding a 73-feet wooden boat at 40 knots in darkness while enemy searchlights and gunfire tried to find you. Cost per MTB ran roughly £50,000. A fleet destroyer cost $1.5 million. 20 MTBs cost less than 1 destroyer. This economic advantage mattered enormously. Britain couldn't replace destroyers at the rate submarines and aircraft destroyed them. But small boatyards across the country could build MTBs. Sir Noel Emlyn revolutionized production through prefabrication. Parts manufactured by furniture makers and piano manufacturers, specialists in working mahogany and complex wood joints, arrived at assembly yards as standardized sections. Final assembly took place at small boatyards that had never built military vessels. This distributed production couldn't be knocked out by bombing any single facility. It also freed up major shipyards for destroyers, cruisers, and larger vessels. The Admiralty initially rejected Emlyn's prefabrication concept. He built the prototype Fairmile at his own expense. When it worked, the Admiralty ordered hundreds. Emlyn's Fairmile Marine eventually delivered 228 Fairmole DBOs, plus hundreds of other types. The Fairmole dressed the Ebo speed advantage through firepower rather than velocity. 115 feet long, 105 to 120 tons. 4-packer engines producing 5,000 brake horsepower. Maximum speed of 29 to 31 knots, slower than MTBs, but the armament was formidable. 6-pounder 57mm guns, 2 pounds pom-pom automatic cannon, multiple 20mm Ericons, 2 to 4 torpedo tubes. The Fairmile D could engage E-boats at range with heavy guns rather than closing for torpedo attack. It carried more depth charges. It had better seeping in rough weather. It became Britain's most effective counter to E-boat advantages. If you're finding this deep dive into British coastal warfare interesting, consider subscribing. It supports the channel and there's much more to explore. Training transformed civilian volunteers into effective combat crews. Bases at Fort William in Scotland, Holyhead in Wales, and coastal stations around Britain ran continuous programs. Officers learned celestial navigation for return journeys when wireless silence was mandatory. They practiced recognition drills until they could identify vessel types from a glimpse of silhouette. They studied German convoy schedules, routes, and escort patterns. Torpedo practice used expensive live weapons against towed targets. The mathematics were unforgiving. Fire too early, the target turns and the torpedo passes astern. Fire too late, insufficient running time before the torpedo exhausts its fuel. Calculate wrong. The torpedo runs deep and passes under the target's keel. Get the deflection angle wrong. Clean miss. Under combat conditions at night with limited visibility and enemy fire, hit rates ran roughly 20 to 25%. That meant 4 torpedoes fired for 1 hit. MTBs carried 4 torpedoes, 1 engagement, 1 potential hit if everything went perfectly. Tactics evolved through brutal experience. Early operations sent single MTBs on patrol. They were slaughtered. E-boats hunted in packs. 3 or 4 Chanel boot working together could bracket a single MTB with gunfire while one closed for the kill. British losses mounted. The solution combined MTBs with motor gunboats. MGBs carried heavier guns, fewer or no torpedoes. A typical patrol included 2 MTBs and 2 MGBs. The MGBs engaged enemy escorts with gunfire, forcing them to maneuver and return fire. While the enemy focused on the MGBs, the MTBs closed from different angles for torpedo shots. This combined arms approach worked. Hit rates improved, losses decreased, radar changed everything. Early MTBs operated blind, relying on visual sighting. By 1943, HMS Beehive at Felixstowe pioneered radar direction of MTB flotillas. Shore-based radar plotted German convoys. It vetoed MTBs to intercept points. It warned of E-boat patrols. The boats themselves carried increasingly sophisticated radar sets. Type 286 surface search radar could detect vessels at several miles range. This negated the E-boat advantage in night combat. The action of May 13, 1942 demonstrated what trained crews and properly designed boats could achieve. MTB 219, 220 and 221 departed due as the 6th MTB flotilla from HMS Wasp. Lieutenant E.A.E. Cornish commanded as senior officer in MTB 220. Temporary Sub-Lieutenant Mark Arnold Forrester commanded 219. Lieutenant commanded 221. Intelligence reported a German convoy escorting the auxiliary cruiser Steer through the Dover Strait. Steer displaced 3,287 gross registered tons. She carried 6 150mm guns and other armament. Her cargo was valuable enough to merit substantial escort. The 5th German torpedo boat flotilla provided protection. ILT's Robia or Type 1924 class 920 tons standard displacement 1,290 tons fully loaded 127 crew 4 105mm guns 6 533mm torpedo tubes maximum speed 33 knots Siedler Rob Vogel or Type 23 class 735 tons standard 1,200 tons loaded 75 crew 3 105mm guns 6 533mm torpedo tubes maximum speed 33 knots. Condor and Falk, similar specifications provided additional escort. These weren't E-boats. These were proper warships with trained naval crews, armor, and firepower that should have annihilated wooden MTBs. The British boats approached from the north around 0330 hours. Darkness and calm seas favored the attack. Arnold Furr in 219 sighted the convoy first. He identified Steer as the primary target. German intelligence hadn't expected MTBs this far from their usual patrol areas. The escorts maintained formation but weren't at full alert. Arnold Furr closed at 500 yards. This was knife fighting range for naval combat. At 500 yards, German gunners could obliterate an MTB with a single accurate salvo. But at 500 yards, torpedo hit probability increased dramatically. Arnold Forrester aimed for Steer, calculated deflection, and fired 1 torpedo. The weapon tracked true initially, but convoys zigged and zagged unpredictably to foil submarine attacks. Stye altered course. The torpedo missed the cruiser and continued toward the German escorts. In the chaos that followed, torpedoes from MTB 219 and MTB 221 struck ILTs in Siedler. The explosions were catastrophic. ILTIS broke in two, the whole snapping amidships. The forward and after sections separated completely and flooded immediately. 115 German sailors had no time to abandon ship. Siedler suffered the same fate moments later, rolling over and breaking apart. 85 crew died. The survivors reported watching their ships fold and disappear within seconds. 2 German torpedo boats, 1,600 tons combined displacement. Destroyed in minutes by boats totaling 147 tons. German gunners on Condor and Falk returned fire. They sank MTB 220, killing Lieutenant Cornish and 7 crew. But the mathematics remained brutal. 3 MTBs had eliminated 2 major escorts. Steer turned back toward France that night rather than risk continuing through the strait with 2 escorts missing. German after-action reports from that engagement don't survive in available sources, but the operational impact was immediate. German convoy schedules changed. Escorts increased. Tactical doctrine shifted to assume MTB presence in the Channel Narrows. The weapons the Kriegsmarine had dismissed as toys had just rewritten their convoy protection requirements. The Comet action 7 months later demonstrated MTB capability against even larger targets. October 13 to 14, 1942. Subiant Robert Deason, Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve, commanded MTB 236 on his first operation as boat commander. German auxiliary cruiser HSK-7 Comet 3,287 gross registered tons attempted to transit the English Channel returning from a commerce raiding cruise. Comet had sunk 7 Allied merchantmen in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Now she was returning to Germany for refit. British intelligence tracked her progress. Multiple MTB flotillas deployed for intercept. Confusion, darkness, and poor visibility scattered the British boats. Deason found himself alone, approaching what he believed was a large merchant vessel. He positioned 236 on the shoreward side, knowing German lookouts would expect attack from seaward. He crept in at slow speed to avoid detection. At 500 yards range, Dreesen fired 2 torpedoes. Both struck amidship. The secondary explosion was massive. Comet's cargo of mines and ammunition detonated. The blast lifted MTB 236 stern from the water. Comet sank with all 251 to 351 crew. No survivors. Dreesen received the Distinguished Service Cross. 1 MTB on its commander's first operation had eliminated a major German raider. The kill validated everything Duane and Scott Payne had claimed about smallboat potential. MTB 81 achieved the first confirmed British MTB submarine kill July 12, 1943. The Strait of Messina between Italy and Sicily. Lieutenant R.G. Gould commanded 81 during Operation supporting the Sicily invasion. German submarine U-561 Type 7C 670 tons surface displacement surface-to-charge batteries. Gould detected the submarine on radar. He closed at high speed. U-561 crash-dived but had insufficient time to reach safe depth. Gould fired 1 torpedo at the swell left by the diving submarine. The torpedo struck U-561 at depth. The submarine imploded. All 48 crew died. The 21st MTB flotilla under Captain Peter Dickens. DSO-DSC achieved a 22% torpedo hit rate across 15 major engagements in 1942-43. This was significantly above average. Most flotillas achieved 15 to 18%. Dickens drilled his crews relentlessly. Recognition, range estimation, deflection calculation, gunnery. His flotilla became the most effective in coastal forces. Canadian forces operated extensively through the 29th MTB flotilla under Lieutenant Anthony Law, Royal Canadian Naval Volunteer Reserve, and the 65th MTB flotilla under Lieutenant Commander J.I.H. Kirkpatrick, DSC, Royal Canadian Naval Volunteer Reserve. The 29th fielded 871 feet 6 inches G-type MTBs numbered 459 through 466. The 65th operated 10 Fairmile D-Dog boats. Canadian MTBs protected the flanks of the D-Day invasion on June 6, 1944. They prevented German E-boat interference with landing craft approaching Normandy beaches. So May 22 to 23, 1944, the 65th MTB flotilla engaged a German convoy off the Belgian coast. They sank 2 E-boats in a night action lasting 40 minutes. Tragically, an explosion at a stund on February 14, 1945 sank 5 Canadian boats and killed 26 sailors. The Royal Norwegian Navy operated 30 motor torpedo boats throughout the war. The 30th later Reds designated 54th Norwegian MTB flotilla consisted of 8 Fairmile D boats based at Lowick in the Shetland Islands. Norwegian crews conducted 161 operations along their occupied coastline. They sank 20 merchant ships and 7 naval vessels. 7 crew members of MTB 345, captured on July 28, 1943 during a raid on Norwegian waters, were executed under Hitler's commando order. They had been conducting legitimate military operations but were murdered as terrorists. Polish Navy MTBs S-1 through S-10 conducted 456 patrols, convoy escorts, or combat operations. On June 22, 1944, Lieutenant Islicki and S to engage 6 German E-boats attacking a British convoy in the Dover Straits. Sislicki's aggressive attack disrupted the German formation. He sank 1 Ebo and damaged 2 others. The convoy escaped without losses. Sislicki received the Distinguished Service Cross and the Polish Wartuti military decoration. German tactical responses reveal how seriously the Kriegsmarine took the MTB threat despite initial dismissal. By 1943, German convoys moved only at night in short stages from port to port, taking full advantage of bad weather when MTBs couldn't operate. Convoy protection escalated dramatically for Posten BA armed patrol boats, rowboats or Roya minesweepers, Spur Brea barrier breakers, which were merchant vessels up to 8,000 tons loaded with anti-aircraft guns, and armed truers with multiple calibers of flak became essential convoy escorts. Academic sources note that by early 1943, it was becoming clear that the previous tactic of lying in wait on a known convoy route in order to make a nighttime ambush was no longer working against these defenses. This was tacit acknowledgement that British MTBs had become a serious threat requiring substantial countermeasures. The resources Germany devoted to convoy protection, resources diverted from other operations, represented strategic success for British coastal forces. E-boat operations declined correspondingly. German sources document that E-boat effectiveness peaked in 1941–42. By 1943, British radar air superiority and overwhelming numbers of MTBs and MGBs had degraded E-boat capabilities. The 43-knot speed advantage meant nothing when British radar tracked them from 30 miles away and vetoed in multiple flotillas. The diesel engine safety meant nothing when RAF bow fighters attacked in daylight. The superior seeping meant nothing when British tactics avoided fighting in conditions that favored E-boats. British coastal forces conducted over 900 major combat actions during the war. They sank approximately 400 enemy vessels. This total included 48 E-boats and 32 submarines. They fired 1,169 torpedoes in combat. They shot down 32 enemy aircraft with their light anti-aircraft armament. They laid mines in enemy waters. They conducted commando insertions and extractions. They rescued downed air crew. They escorted convoys. British losses totaled 170 coastal forces craft of all types. This represented a kill ratio of approximately 2.35 to 1. Considering that MTBs engaged larger, more heavily armed vessels routinely, this ratio represents genuine combat effectiveness. Decorations reflected the intensity of operations. Coastal Forces personnel received approximately 3,000 gallantry awards during the war. This was more than any other Royal Navy branch. 4 Victoria Crosses were awarded to Coastal Forces personnel, Britain's highest decoration for valor. Dozens of Distinguished Service Orders, hundreds of Distinguished Service Crosses, thousands of Distinguished Service Medals for ratings. The casualty rate was brutal. Of roughly 30,000 personnel who served in Coastal Forces, approximately 1 in 6 became casualties, killed, wounded, or captured. Post-war MTBs remained in the Royal Navy service through redesignation as fast patrol boats. The Brave class, introduced in 1958, represented the final evolution. Gas turbine-powered, capable of 50 knots, armed with torpedoes and guns. But changing naval doctrine emphasized anti-submarine warfare and carrier operations over coastal combat. HMS Hornet, the primary coastal forces base, decommissioned in 1956. By 1957, the Royal Navy had largely abandoned coastal forces concepts. Export markets thrived. Vosper Thorneyhoft, formed by merger in 1966, became a major supplier of fast attack craft worldwide. Italy, Malaysia, Germany, Denmark, Brunei, Libya, Ghana, Peru, Singapore, Iran, and Brazil all purchased boats based on British designs. The hard-chine planing hull pioneered by Duquesne and Scott Payne became the standard for fast attack craft globally. The doctrine evolved rather than died. On October 21, 1967, Egyptian Komor-class missile boats sank the Israeli destroyer using Styx anti-ship missiles. The Komors displaced 71 tons, roughly the same as a Vosper MTB. They carried missiles instead of torpedoes, but the concept remained identical. Small, fast, cheap boats using surprise and standoff weapons to destroy larger warships. The MTB concept had simply gained a 30 range. Modern navies operate hundreds of fast attack craft directly descended from World War II MTB doctrine. They're larger now. They carry missiles, advanced radar, electronic warfare systems. But the fundamental principle, speed and firepower concentrated in a small expendable platform, traces directly to Peter Duquesne's MTB 102 and the innovations British engineers developed when the Admiralty wasn't watching. The National Museum of the Royal Navy opened the Night Eye Hunters exhibit at Gosaport in 2021. It tells the Coastal Forces story through artifacts, veteran interviews, and preserved boats. MTB 102, the prototype that proved the concept, is maintained by the Coastal Forces Heritage Trust. The boat that the Admiralty initially rejected, that Duquesne built with his own money, that achieved 48 knots and became the template for 350 production boats, survives as a memorial to engineering determination. May 13, 1942. 0 for 15 hours. 3 British MTBs turned away from the burning wreckage of Iltis and Seidler. 2 German torpedo boats, 1,600 tons combined, broken in half and sinking. 1 MTB lost, but the mission succeeded. The convoy turned back that night. The wooden toys had proven they were weapons. The civilian boats crewed by weekend sailors had destroyed professional warships. German naval planning would never again dismiss small boat threats. Convoy protection requirements doubled. E-boat operations became defensive rather than offensive. The Channel, which Germany had controlled for 2 years, became contested water. The ultimate measure wasn't the 400 vessels sunk, though that number proved capability. It wasn't the 3,000 decorations for valor, though they proved courage. It was the strategic calculation. Germany diverted destroyers, patrol boats, flagships, and aircraft to convoy protection. Resources that could have reinforced the Atlantic-Hubert campaign or Mediterranean operations stayed in the Channel because MTBs made unescorted convoy suicide. 73 feet of mahogany, 49 tons, 39 knots, 4 torpedoes, built by furniture makers, crewed by civilians, dismissed by professionals on both sides. These boats changed coastal warfare forever. The British engineers who designed them against Admiralty skepticism, who funded prototypes from personal resources, who proved the concept through performance rather than promises, created a weapon that every major navy would eventually copy. The Germans learned this lesson on May 13, 1942 when they laughed at Britain's toy boats and called them pleasure craft playing at war. When Iltis and Seidler broke in half and sank in seconds, when 200 German sailors drowned because their command had underestimated what British engineering could achieve, the laughter stopped, the dismissal ended, and the Kriegsmarine never made that mistake.